Middle East and North Africa. The next administration must re engage with Middle Eastern and North African nations and not abandon the region. Without U.S. leadership, the region may tumble further into chaos or fall prey to American adversaries. This recommendation requires a multidimensional strategy. First, the U.S. must prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear technology and deliver capabilities, and more broadly, block Iranian ambitions. This means, inter alia, reinstituting and expanding Trump administration sanctions, providing security assistance for regional partners, supporting through public diplomacy and otherwise freedom seeking Iranian people in their revolt against the mullahs, and ensuring Israel has both the military means and the political support and flexibility to take what it deems to be appropriate measures to defend itself against the Iranian regime and its regional proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Second, the next administration should build on the Trump administration's diplomatic successes by encouraging other Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, to enter the Abraham Accords. Related policies should include reversing, as appropriate, the Biden administration's degradation of the long-standing partnership with Saudi Arabia. The Palestinian Authority should be defunded. A further key priority is keeping Turkey in the Western fold and a NATO ally. This includes a vigorous outreach to Turkey to dissuade it from hedging toward Russia or China, which is likely to require a rethinking of U.S. support for YPG/PKK, People's Protection Units/Kurdistan Workers' Party, Kurdish forces, which Ankara believes are an existential threat to its security. For the foreseeable future and much longer than one new administration, Middle Eastern oil will play a key role in the world economy. Therefore, the U.S. must continue to support its allies and compete with its economic adversaries, including China. Relations with Saudi Arabia should be strengthened in a way that seriously curtails Chinese influence in Riyadh. Third, it is in the U.S. national interest to build a Middle East security pact that includes Israel, Egypt, the Gulf states, and potentially India as a second Quad arrangement. Protecting freedom of navigation in the Gulf and in the Red Sea/Suez Canal is vital to the world economy and therefore to U.S. prosperity as well. In North Africa, security cooperation with European allies, especially France, will be vital to limit growing Islamist threats and the incursion of Russian influence through positionings of the Wagner Group. The U.S. cannot neglect a concern for human rights and minority rights, which must be balanced with strategic and security considerations. Special attention must be paid to challenges of religious freedom, especially the status of Middle Eastern Christians and other religious minorities, as well as the human trafficking endemic to the region. Sub-Sahara Africa. Africa's importance to U.S. foreign policy and strategic interests is rising and will only continue to grow. Its explosive population growth, large reserves of industry-dependent minerals, proximity to key maritime shipping routes, and its collective diplomatic power ensure the continent's global importance. Yet, as Africa's strategic significance has grown, the U.S.'s relative influence there has declined. Terrorist activity on the continent has increased, while America's competitors are making significant gains for their own national interests. The PRC's companies dominate the African supply chain for certain minerals critical to emergence technologies. African nations comprise major country bloc elements that shield the PRC and Russia from international isolation for their human rights abuses, and African nations staunchly support PRC foreign policy goals on issues such as Hong Kong occupation, South China Sea's dispute arbitration, and Taiwan. The new administration can correct the strategic failing of existing policy by prioritizing Africa and by undertaking fundamental changes in how the United States works with African nations. At a bare minimum, the next administration should shift strategic focus from assistance to growth, reorient the focus of U.S. overseas development assistance away from standalone humanitarian developmental aid and toward fostering free market systems in African countries by incentivizing and facilitating U.S. private sector engagement in these countries. Development aid alone does little to develop countries and can fuel corruption and violent conflict. While the United States should always be willing to offer emergency and humanitarian relief, both U.S. and African long term interests are better served by a free market based, private growth focused strategy to Africa's economic challenges. Countermalign Chinese activity on the continent. This should include the development of powerful public diplomacy efforts to counter Chinese influence campaigns with commitments to freedom of speech and the free flow of information, the creation of a template digital hygiene program that African countries can access to sanitize and protect their sensitive communications networks from espionage by the PRC and other hostile actors, the recognition of Somaliland's statehood as a hedge against the U.S.'s deteriorating position in Djibouti, and a focus on supporting American companies involved in industries important to U.S. national interests or that have a competitive advantage in Africa. Counter the furtherance of terrorism. African country based terrorist groups like Boko Haram may currently lack the capability to attack the United States, but at least some of them would eventually try if allowed to consolidate their operations and plan such attacks. The immediate threat they pose lies in their abilities and willingness to strike American targets in their regions of operation or to harm U.S. interests in other ways. The U.S. should support capable African military and security operations through the State Department and other federal agencies responsible for granting foreign military education, training, and security assistance. Build a coalition of the cooperative. Rather than thinning limited federal resources by spreading funds across all countries, including some that are unsupportive or even hostile to the United States, the next administration should focus on those countries with which the U.S. can expect a mutual beneficial relationship. After being designated focus countries by the State Department, such nations should receive a full suite of American engagement. That said, the next administration should still maintain a baseline level of contact even with those countries with which it has less than fruitful relationships in order to encourage positive developments and to be in position to seize unexpected diplomatic opportunities as they arise. Focus on core diplomatic activities, and stop promoting policies birthed in the American culture wars. African nations are particularly and reasonably non receptive to the U.S. social policies such as abortion and pro LGBT initiatives being imposed on them. The United States should focus on core security, economic, and human rights engagement with African partners and reject the promotion of divisive policies that hurt the deepening of shared goals between the U.S. and its African partners.